Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. So this is why he's a professor. He sent me a note telling me that he had something that he wanted to say off the back of what Ruth was saying.
Yeah,
you are breaking down silos literally here. Because
why? I found what Ruth said really interesting, and in a funny way, and I don't mean this as critical, incredibly depressing. That chart she showed of the complexity of the system, I mean, did that give you a headache? And it's all true, all that subtlety, all that complexity, all those unintended consequences. But it's not the foundation for any kind of politics that's going to work in our world. That you have to, I mean, she's absolutely right about stories, but we need to figure out a way to tell this story that captures people's hearts and their heads. And that's what I worry about. I mean, I think this has been a fantastic gathering, but there's a lot of centrifugal force, right? I mean, there's so many different initiatives, and they're all really valuable. But if you were to write a headline for this meeting, I honestly don't know what the lead is, except there are a lot of people who care about moving the food system in the direction of greater sustainability. And I have to say, just speaking as a journalist, that's not enough, I think. And the example I think about...
Isn't that the problem with journalism, though? Really? It's like we need something so simple that we can write it in a single headline, and life is incredibly complicated.
Yes,
and doesn't boil down.
You know what?
I
tell my students, part of the art of journalism is simplification and exaggeration. And it's true, we traffic in all those things in an effort to take very complex topics. And as a journalist covering food for 20 years, that's a lot of what I've done, is try to figure out how can I simplify this in such a way that's honest to the facts, but nevertheless reaches people who would never take time to go to a food conference. And there's a couple ways to think about it. I mean, I think the most power, I mean, if we were all to agree on something, let me give you an example from politics. One of the most successful political movements in America in the last couple of years has been the move for gay rights. Specifically, we have seen gay marriage proposed and accepted in the span of a few years, remarkable speed. Now, the movement for gay and transgender rights has a lot of issues. There are workplace issues. There was a whole menu, the way we have a menu of food issues. But the movement got together and was corralled into saying, we're going to talk about gay marriage for the next couple of years. And then maybe we'll talk about something else. And that uniformity, I think, helped a lot. So the question then becomes, what's our gay marriage? We have people in this room who want to all push in the same direction, yet they have different priorities.
Is it climate change?
I think it might be. I think you're onto something. I mean, I think that the biggest challenge we face as a civilization is also the biggest challenge we face as a food system, which is how to create a climate-friendly agriculture. And if you look at, and now I'm going to get to one of the strengths of the food issue, which is that many of the solutions support other solutions. It's not, we don't have a zero-sum problem, I don't think. Which is to say, if we were to push this system in the direction of being more climate-friendly, specifically at the level of the farm, what would that mean? It would mean we evolved our farm policies, our agricultural policies, to support things like carbon sequestration. Very, very important and exciting issue. As you unpack that, what does that mean? Well, it means you have to diversify your farms. Monocultures do not sequester carbons. It means you have to move toward more perennial agriculture. And suddenly you're moving toward a different diet because we need to diversify our diet as well. So I think that if we chose, I mean, to use Ruth's metaphor of the road, if the road were to harness everything we care about, to move toward a system that actually did more than just mitigate the food system's impact on climate by reducing meat consumption and all those things we need to do, but actually had a positive story to tell. And I think we now have that story, which is agriculture and food, unlike any other area, can actually contribute not just to mitigating climate change, but to rolling it back. the French had a very important proposal at COP21, and that was to get countries to commit to a 0.4% increase in carbon in their soils. Now, this sounds very technical, but it's actually a very exciting idea. How do you do that? Well, we're starting to learn how to do that. We're learning how to measure carbon. And the story hasn't yet been told, though, that a third of the carbon in the atmosphere today was once in soils. And we can put it back. How do we do that? Photosynthesis. It's an incredible process. The plants take in, using sunlight, they take in carbon dioxide, they split off the oxygen and let it go, and they take the carbon, and you know what they do? They don't just form food and sugars, they send it down to their roots. 40% of it goes down to the roots and out and leaches into the soil because they want to attract microbes. Okay? They want to feed bacteria and other microbes. Those microbes eat those sugars, and it passes into the soil food web, and that is how we create soil. We can do that now in our lifetimes. What a positive story to tell. What a positive story to tell farmers, that they can join in the most important work of our generation, and perhaps of any generation. So I think that, and then so how do you do that? Well, then you get into the details, but most of them tend in the direction of more diversity on the farm, more diversity in the diet, more perennials, less annuals, and I think then you're heading in a direction. So I think we need to think that way. And the other way I'd frame that too is we have to move from a fossil fuel-based food system. Because now when you eat a calorie of food from the supermarket, it takes 10 calories of fossil fuel to produce it. That's crazy when you're using photosynthesis. Before industrial agriculture, you got 2.3 calories of food from every 1 calorie of fossil fuel you put into it. And a calorie is just a measure of energy. So what if we also conceive this move toward a climate-friendly agriculture is to getting our food chain off of the basis of oil, because when we eat at a fast food outlet, we are eating oil, make no mistake, a lot of oil, and move it toward a diet of contemporary sunshine. That connotes health, that connotes sustainability. We need metaphors.
All right. I want to give people some takeaways, and one of the things you do is when you talk about the culture of food, you do food rules.
Yeah. You
collect them, and sometimes you make them up.
That's right. Well, you know, I've been very interested in culture. Food, we shouldn't forget, is not just about fuel. We're different than other animals. We eat not only to sustain ourselves, but to form our communities, our families. What happens at the table is just so profound, and it's the basis of civilization. Yet we persist to talk about food in this technocratic way, and you should eat this nutrient and not eat that nutrient. And all our food labels are, I think, have all the wrong information. I mean, sugar is very important, but foods are more important.
What should be on the food label then? What would you want to see?
Skull and crossbones, I guess, if it's processed food. And I don't know, we'll make it very simple. I don't mean to be so blunt. So my food rules are, okay, so you're buying cereal for your child, or your child's buying cereal for him or herself. And maybe we teach our kids, look at how many grams of sugar, and look at how many weird colors there are, and weird chemicals. And so you're standing in the cereal aisle studying that box for a very long time. Well, here's a simpler way to do it. Don't buy any cereals that change the color of the milk. That's all you need to know. Don't buy foods that your great-grandmother wouldn't recognize as food. That tube of portable yogurt, I mean, does she know how you administer this to your body?
So, Michael, that doesn't leave us much food, right?
It leaves us plenty of food.
It actually leaves us real food.
It leaves us real food.
Yeah,
and of
real
course,
food.
My biggest food rule is the simplest of all, which is eat food, real food, not too much, mostly plants. That really is all you need to know. There is so much overcomplication of food and nutrition. And I did a couple years of studying nutrition, and it's remarkable how little we know about nutrition. I mean, we've been putting out nutritional guidelines. I know perhaps Walt Willett is here, and he might take issue with this, but we've been putting out these complicated guidelines for years and years and years, and we've been ignoring what turns out to be perhaps the most important thing about nutrition, which is the microbiome. We've measured what our bodies need, but it turns out that's only 10% of your cells. 90% of your cells are other species, and we haven't been designing guidelines for them. And they like different things. They don't like sugar. They don't like processed food. They like fiber, many different kinds of fiber. They like plants. So we need to, so do we have to revolutionize the guidelines? Maybe, or we just eat food and it takes care of it. So I am a great proponent of simplification in our eating choices and in our politics around food. I mean, we have so much work to do, and I also think the other thing I would propose, having been privileged to be part of this gathering, I mean, this is in a way the Davos of food. Many countries represented here, including mine, do not have a national food policy. And that is, in this era, given how important food is to our health, to the health of the environment, is simply unforgivable. We have agricultural policies, but they are not the same thing. Agricultural policies tend to deal with yield and the welfare of farmers, with the result now that we have agricultural policies that are at war with our health objectives and our environmental objectives.
Give us one example.
Well, in America, we subsidize, through our crop subsidies, the production of high fructose corn syrup. That's what the agricultural department is doing. On the other side, the healthcare system, Obamacare, is paying for the treatment of type 2 diabetes. So the government is representing both sides in the war on type 2 diabetes. That's absolutely crazy. A food policy would force the rationalization of agricultural policies to support our objectives. I could imagine a time in 5 or 10 years when all nations had a food policy, not just a farm policy, a food policy. And those ministers or czars or whoever they were or councils would meet once a year, the way the G8 meets, where the economics ministers get together. And they would thrash out these issues, try to rationalize them. And there's no reason that this amazing institution that Gunhild and her colleagues have created couldn't be the venue for that conversation.
Michael, how do we find more of your work? How do we find you? How do we get your advice in the future?
I'm not hard to find. I mean, I have a website, and lately I've been doing a lot of television. I've been doing documentaries. I did one on nutrition, if you're interested in following up on food rules, and that's called In Defense of Food on public television in the United States, and a series on cooking and the role of cooking in the whole food problem and in our culture called Cooked, which is available on Netflix.
Michael Pollan, you almost didn't need me. Thank you so much.
I did need you. Thank you.